2017, we had extensive consultation, and we also commissioned an independent assessment of the evaluation performance indicators since it was started in 2013. So we tried to distill, lessons, as well as we took, the recommendation which appeared in the independent assessment. We made some adjustments on the technical note and the scorecard. And we have already circulated the technical note and the scorecard, and which is also posted on the UNEC site. So especially for those focal points for this particular performance indicator, we encourage you just to familiarize yourself because reporting for this is going to be started this year. So in this, I'm just moving to the agenda. Probably I think you can, Gillian, you can help me moving, the slides. So we do have, 3 items. One is what is the UN-SWAP framework, what is the UN-SWAP evaluation performance indicator, and what are the criteria for scoring evaluation, what can entities meet or exceed, how can entities meet or exceed the requirement of the UN-SWAP evaluation scorecard. And Felix and David from ESCAWA and WFP, they have kindly agreed to give us, their experience in terms of applying this scorecard. So probably without further ado, over to you, Priya.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mesai. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. So I think most of you are familiar already with the UN-SWAP, and for those that are not, the UN-SWAP is an accountability mechanism, and it was endorsed by the CEB in 2012, and since then there has been an annual report against a set of 15 indicators. I think it's soon. I should be muted. Okay. So, and these indicators are functional indicators. So they are indicators on different functions in any organization. And one of them is the performance indicator on evaluation. So the UN-SWAP first cycle was lasting from 2012 until 2017. And this year is the starting point of a new cycle, and therefore an updated version of the UN-SWAP that we call UN-SWAP 2.0. Just to give you some information about the UN-SWAP 2.0, the main changes is that there are now 17 indicators rather than 15. The reason is that we have included indicators on results. One of the limitations of the previous accountability framework is that it was based on functions like financial resources, capacity building, evaluation, strategic planning, audit, policy, but not so much on results. So this time the UN-SWAP 2.0 includes results. That's one new component. Another one is leadership. During the first cycle from 2012 to 2017, it was quite clear that leadership is very important to move the needle for gender equality and empowerment of women, and therefore there is now a new indicator on leadership. In addition to that, there are also some new features. One is that the indicator on gender architecture and parity has been split in 2 different indicators. It was a composite indicator, quite difficult to measure, and some entities were doing very well on gender architecture and not so well on parity. So it was difficult to capture both things together. So now there are 2 different indicators, one for gender architecture and another one for equal representation of women. And finally, some indicators remain unchanged, but some indicators have been strengthened, meaning it is more difficult now to meet the requirements for those indicators. And one of those indicators is the evaluation indicator in particular. There are a few others. As you know, the ratings, the possible ratings in the UN-SWAP are other than not applicable, which is actually one of the performance indicator for evaluation is one of those that many times is not applicable for some entities because they don't have an evaluation function. So other than not applicable ratings, the possible ratings are missing requirements, approaching requirements, meeting requirements, and exceeding requirements. So, and then one of the main changes for the evaluation indicator is that what it was before enough to meet requirements now is not going to be enough. So let me see. Thank you, Gillian, that you're moving the slides. So before in the UN-SWAP 1.0, to meet requirements, it was enough to meet the UNEC gender-related norms and standards. And to exceed requirements, an additional requirement was demonstrating effective use of the UNEC guidance on evaluating from a human rights and gender equality perspective. So now this is actually not for exceeding requirements, but for meeting requirements. So in the new UN-SWAP 2.0, in the new or updated indicator, performance indicator for evaluation, to meet requirements, these two components have to be present. So the meeting the UNEC norms and standards, and also applying the UNEC guidance on integrating human rights and gender equality in evaluations during all phases of the evaluation. And also subsequently and accordingly for exceeding requirements, the indicator has been strengthened as well. And then in addition to meeting requirements, it is needed to conduct at least one evaluation to assess the corporate performance on gender mainstreaming every 5 to 8 years. So this is the main new aspects of the evaluation, but I want to say also something, if I can, about the results for the evaluation, performance indicator and evaluation in the previous UN-SWAP cycle. And what I want to say is that the evaluation was one of the weakest indicators. Normally, the UN-SWAP results are collected in a report, the Secretary General report that is presented to the ECOSOC every year. And there is no information about individual entities, but there is aggregate information about progress for each indicator. And then there are a few indicators doing very well, particularly audit, by the way, is one of the indicators that progressed more in this previous cycle, and some that are lagging behind, like particularly those related to resource tracking and resource allocation, and also those related to parity or capacity assessment. And then the indicator on evaluation was always sort of there in the bottom of the table, but last year it improved dramatically. Actually, the improvement was 14 percentage points. It went from 58% of ratings to 72%. Which is a very good rating compared to other indicators. So I think there was a strong recognition of the role of UNEC and the role of all of you in improving not only compliance, but also improving your own systems to score the indicator in a much more transparent and accurate way. And particularly from the UN-SWAP team, we appreciated the peer review exercise that you were conducting and the publication that you put together. And it was at the basis of our own analysis of quality assurance for other indicators. So we are really very, very grateful for your work. And we remain at your disposal for any support that you need for the next reporting period.
Thank you so much, Priya, for the overview, as well as because we have started, the second generation of the UN-SWAP 2, and even for the evaluation performance indicator, we have tried to align to some of the requirements, and as Priya indicated, one of the new criteria that we have added, which all entities are expected to report against, particularly for the exit requirements, is the conduct of at least one evaluation to assess corporate performance on gender mainstreaming or equivalent every 5 years. I will come to that in one of the slides, but this is one of the new requirements. And the other one is we have tried just to clarify the process and application of the UN-SWAP evaluation performance indicator because, for instance, when we started, this reporting against the performance indicator, we had certain criteria to report against, which was extremely difficult, especially for smaller organizations with a smaller evaluation capacity. So through the years, we have defined these criteria, and since last year, we had 4 criteria, but we tried just to combine the 2 criteria, and now each report is going to be reported against 3 criteria. The other one is we have also added some rubrics in the scorecard because one, it's just going to harmonize the process for reporting. The other one is it just gives guidance on what we mean by approaching criteria or approaching requirements or meeting requirements or exceeding requirements. So we have 3 criteria. Gillian, can you please move the slide to the scoring criteria?
Yes, we're here.
So as you can see, maybe sorry because I'll be disconnected for 2 minutes. Felix, can you please chip in because I'm just going to set up my computer. I just got to the office. So Felix, I think you can start your presentation on the good practices, and then I'll continue my presentation. Sorry for the disturbance.
Very good. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm Felix Herzog, working at UN-SWAP, and thank you, Mesa and Priya, for your excellent presentations and comments. My role today will be to share with you my experience on how to assess the reports individually. So as already Masai said, in the previous UN-SWAP we had the 4 criteria to evaluate each individual evaluation report, and now in the UN-SWAP 2 we will have only 3 criteria that are related to evaluating every individual evaluation report. So basically, when each one of us, of each entity starts with this assessing, the first step is to really check 2 things. First, that the reports are actually evaluation reports, as defined by UNEC. So this you can double check in the technical note or in the UNEC definitions. And second, that really the report has to have been finalized, in this case in 2018. So once this is clear, we start with the scoring. The first step you need to do is to open an individual scoring tool, and then, which is exactly in like the Annex 1 in the technical note. If some of you have the technical note with you, you can just go on page 10 on Annex 1, and you'll be able to follow a little bit the rationale I'll be explaining through the examples right now. So now I'll be directly moving to the first criterion. So the first criterion focuses on the integration of gender in 3 aspects: in the evaluation scope, in the evaluation criteria, and evaluation questions. So there are 3 elements to it. So basically, the easiest way to give rating for this criterion would be to bear in mind with these 3 aspects. So for example, if you have a report that does not mention gender in any of the 3 aspects, the scoring is very easy. You would just give it a 0. And the score is also very easy if the report integrates gender in all the 3 aspects. So you would just give it a 3, meaning it fully integrates gender. But however, in most cases, the reports only integrate gender in some of the aspects, and this is the most interesting part, how to give, in this case, a 1 or a 2, because we are aware that the scale is from 0 to 3, and no decimals are allowed. So for example, if a report integrates gender only in one of the 3 aspects, for example, it could gender only in the scope, but then there would be no reference to gender in the evaluation criteria and evaluation questions, then it would cover just one of these three aspects of the criterion. So then we would directly give a score of 1 in this case. And then, for example, if our report integrates gender in 2 of the 3 aspects, for example, it could have integrated in scope and in only 1 evaluation questions, but not more than in 1 criteria, then we would give it a 2. So basically, following this logic, you will decide on the scoring for this first criterion, and you will insert the result in what would be the third column of the tool. I think here we couldn't see it. And then on the fourth column, there will be also the opportunity to provide your explanation referring to the 3 aspects and why you have given this rating. And I mean, I'm talking of you in general. It might be you doing it internally. It might be you doing as the peer learning exchange, or it might be a consultant or anybody external that will be assessing the evaluation report. Now moving to criterion 2. The criterion 2 focuses on the integration of gender in the methodology, methods and tools, and data analysis and techniques. Here we have the 3 aspects we're looking at. So, 1 second. The first aspect that I would consider it would be the data collection and tools, which would cover the question A in the second column that you would have in Annex 1. And then the second aspect would be sampling and participation, which would cover questions B and C in the second column. And the third aspect, the ethical standards, which would cover question D in the second column. So now, for giving a score in criterion 1, we will use the same logic than in criterion 1. If gender is integrated in none of the aspects of the 3 I've mentioned right now, we would give it a 0. And if it's integrated in all the 3, we would give it a 3. But let's give examples where gender is only integrated in some aspects. For example, if a report integrates gender in data collection and in sampling and participation, which are the first 2 aspects that are explained also afterwards in the second column with the questions, but at the same time it does not lay out the ethical standards, which would be the third aspect, you would give it a 2, meaning it satisfactorily integrates gender. And on the contrary, if you have only one aspect having represented in this criterion, then you would give it a 1. So basically, to give the rating, you will always check in how many aspects of the criterion gender was integrated, always bearing in mind the scale from 0 to 3. And for each of the criterion, you can always go to the unique guidance documents that are referred also in the annex itself in the second column. And this would give you much more detail and depth as to when you have some doubts as to if you should give a 1 or you should give a 2, because these are the cases that are the most difficult to discern. Between a 0 and 3, like score 3 and score 0 are very easy to give, but it's actually in this middle way where we have to really pay attention. And it's also our role also to be strict enough so that we can also push our own entities to move forward to further integrate gender in the next cycle, because basically this is the philosophy with which also this technical note has been prepared, and the entire UN-SWAP criteria, and in this case the evaluation performance indicator, is being thought through. Finally, the third criterion. And the third criterion focuses on integration of gender in 3 parts of the report: the evaluation findings, the conclusions, and the recommendations. So from my experience, the easiest way to give the scoring for this criterion is by looking at each of the 3 parts of the report separately. So basically, if the report integrates gender in the findings, the conclusions, and the recommendations, in all the 3, it would obtain a 3. Fully integrates gender. However, if the report integrates gender only in the findings and conclusions, for example, but not in the recommendations, it would obtain a 2, as only 2 of the 3 parts have gender. And once you decide on your rating, you would insert it in the third column, and you will provide your explanation in the last column. Finally, once you have inserted for each criterion your score, you will add them, and you will obtain the total score of the individual report. And the overall score you can obtain for the report is between 0 and 9, 0 to 3, which would mean misses requirements, 4 to 6, which would mean it approaches requirements, and 7 to 9, which would mean it meets the requirements. And once you would have the results for each of the reports, you could calculate the average report score. But this would be just like the first part of the exercise, because as you know, this year we have introduced the criterion number 4, which would be the supplementary element that would be needed if an entity wants to score exceeds requirements. I think at this point, this was my contribution regarding assessing the individual reports for the first 3 criteria. So I will hand over, I guess, to Mesa at this stage, and you can decide if we want to hear Dawi's experience on evaluating or assessing criterion 4, or if you want to continue with other parts of the presentation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Felix, for this very informative presentation, especially on the applicability of this reporting. So probably, Gillian, can you move the slide to slide 9? Yeah. So I will try to give you a brief snapshot about the essential step for the reporting, because I think we do have, I saw the name of, those people connected, and we do have, some people who are new to the UN-SWAP. So probably I think this might give them, an overview about, the key steps that are going to be pursued in terms of reporting against this performance indicator. So as you can see from the slide, so the first step in the process is evaluation officers appoint UN-SWAP evaluation performance indicator focal point. And then once that focal point has been assigned by the head of the evaluation office, that person will determine or choose, the type of assessment. The technical note provides 3 options for a review of the UN-SWAP EPI. One is the internal self-assessment. The second type of assessment that the evaluation officers can adopt is the pre-learning exchange, and then the external review. More and more organizations are moving towards the external review because it gives us, more objective assessment. But even the self-assessment that's being employed by, different UN entities or evaluation offices are also improved over time. And as Priya already indicated, we have also, through the Human Rights and Gender Equality Working Group, we facilitate peer learning exchange. And in fact, the number of agencies that are participating or benefiting from this platform really varies from year to year, but quite several organizations have benefited so far, and this year so far, I think 4 agencies have signed up. So at a minimum, UN entities are highly encouraged to submit, the UNEG endorsed EPI scorecard, even when based on internal or self-assessment to allow for comparability. In fact, most of the UNEG members are using, the UN endorsed technical note in the EPI, but it's not really used across, all reporting entity, because last year we had, 46 entities reported against the EPI. Large majority have used the scorecard, but there were also a handful of offices that did, the assessment on their own. So the third step is once the type of assessment has been determined by the evaluation office decides on the type of evaluation to be considered centralized, decentralized, and then the number of evaluation to be considered for their annual reporting. That is the total universe or the sample. But from our perspective, and as highlighted in the technical notes, both centralized and decentralized evaluation should be considered, and especially the total inverse of evaluation. Evaluation should be considered for offices with decentralized evaluation function and established quality assessment. But what we would advise all reporting entities is to give the breakdown of those centralized evaluation as well as decentralized evaluation, because this was raised in the last AGM, the annual meeting of UNEG, about the need to distinguish the corporate and the decentralized, and then definitely all entities are also expected to report the aggregated score, because there is one aggregated score that is going to be reported as meeting or exceeding, approaching, or missing. And then the fourth step is individual report scoring against 3 criteria. Felix has already touched upon that, but probably I will say a few words on that. And then once the individual evaluation reporting scoring have been assessed against the 3 criteria, the next step is if there are more than one evaluation considered for the reporting, entities are expected to do the aggregated or the meta score of their assessment. And then finally, the report has to be reported through the UN-SWAP focal point, and it has to be uploaded to the online system. And the first step, I think Felix has already touched upon this. This is the assessment against the 3 criteria on a 4-point scale. Fully integrated, that means applies when all the elements under the criteria are met. Satisfactory integrated applies when a satisfactory level has been reached and many of the elements are met. Or partial integrated applies when some of the minimal elements that are being described in the scorecard, because as I indicated earlier, we have defined the rubrics against the 3 criteria, and based on that, each criteria will be rated. And then the next one is how should individual evaluation reports be scored? After reviewing the individual report for each criteria, the score is going to be assigned. This is the sum of the 3 criteria. If it falls between 7 and 9, it meets 4 and 6 approach. But here this is also something that we have changed this year as part of the revised technical notes, and the maximum number of points a report can obtain is 9. So even if all reports considered as part of the assessment are fully integrated the gender perspective, the maximum score is meets. We'll see how entities can achieve, the exceeding criteria in the next slide. So the next one is how should the aggregate score be calculated? Once you have filled in the scorecard for each individual evaluations, score for each evaluation are going to be added and divided. So based on that, for instance, I think this is a typical example that we provided. So if there are 3 evaluations and if the rating against the 3 criteria is 333, so the individual evaluation score would be 9. And the meta score, let me see which slide, because I'm not with Gillian, who is moving the slides. Gillian, can you please move the slide to 12? I can see it. Okay, yeah, perfect. So next slide is about what are the criteria to exceed requirements. This is a new addition introduced in the revised technical note and scorecard, which calls all entities to conduct or to commission at least one evaluation to address corporate performance on gender mainstreaming. So here what you need to bear in mind is that entities whose reports are not meeting the requirement but have, even if they have conducted the corporate evaluation, unless the evaluation reports are reaching the meeting requirement, it cannot be in the exit category. So in other words, the meta evaluation score should be at least 6.5 which is the lower boundary for meeting requirement. So in order to demonstrate that, the evaluation offices of the reporting entities have conducted, this corporate level gender mainstreaming or equivalent evaluation. This has to be uploaded every year into the online application. Can you move on the next slide? Because I think, so this is a typical scorecard which all agencies are expected to use. So I think if you don't have any question on this, probably we'll come back to it during the Q&A session. Can you move to the next slide, Gillian? So since reporting against this evaluation performance has been started in 2013, we've seen, a lot of progress. The awareness, the commitment of UNEC, as well as all reporting entities have increased. And as Priya indicated, it is to be one of, the lower performing or the weaker performing performance indicator. But over the years, especially since last year, we've seen, quite commendable progress. But we have also, various challenges. That's the reason why I emphasize the need to use at least, even if, we are using, the self-assessment or the peer learning or the external assessment, at least as a minimum, as a bare minimum, we need to use, the UNEG endorsed technical note and scorecard for our reporting. So through this process, we can address, some of the challenges that are being listed in this slide. I think without taking much time, I will hand over to Dawit from WFP. He will give us WFP's evaluation office experience in terms of conducting this corporate level gender mainstreaming or equivalent evaluation, which is the requirement that we set for the exit category. Over to you, Dawit.
Dawit, can you hear us? Dawit, are you there? Let me just send a quick message to Dawit to see if he can hear us. It seems that Dawit is connected but is unable to hear us. So I think we can proceed in the meantime with the reporting cycle.
Yeah, I think we can move on the Q&A if there are any
questions so far before we proceed with the 2018 reporting cycle that Priya will discuss in a while. Let's just check if there's anything on the chat box at this point.
Hi, Gillian. I don't know if you're waiting for me to jump in. Hi, David. You seem to be online now, right?
Yeah, I'm back online. Sorry
Okay,
for.
good. Yeah.
So may I continue, or can you hear me clearly?
I think it is okay. I don't see Messiah or Gillian responding, but I think, yeah, we were sort of waiting for you before going into the next point in the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
May I continue?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so just to share on the good practice, WSP has been commissioning external assessments annually since 2013, and the first 2 years were approaching requirements, and then the remaining 2 years of the 5-year, we were meeting requirements, and then recently we slided back to approaching requirements, partly because of the new decentralized evaluations we have been commissioning last year, and with the decentralized evaluations, first of all,
We cannot hear you, David. Can you repeat the last sentence?
decentralized evaluation, because until 2014, 15, we have the old evaluation policy.
Sorry, David, your voice seems to disappear.
Oh, I haven't moved anywhere. I don't know why. Maybe it's a connection here, but
now we can hear you very well.
Okay, sorry for that. So I was saying until 2014, we had all the evaluation policy, which covered only centralized evaluations. But since 2015-16, we have a new evaluation policy which includes decentralized evaluations. So the number of decentralized evaluations, as well as the quality assurance capacity of country offices, is not the same as the capacity we have here in Office of Evaluation. So the overall score has slided back to approaching. Now, what I'm trying to highlight also is these external assessments, although they are a little bit more objective than self-assessment, they have come also with their challenges. Basically, the issue of comparability of annual reports has not been consistent, because different external evaluation firms have carried out the annual assessment, so it was a bit difficult to really compare performance year by year. And to avoid that, since last year, we have integrated the annual external assessment, which has been carried out just separately. We have integrated it into the assessment of quality assurance, and therefore gender is part of now the dimensions of evaluation, which is assessed on a basis of post hoc. So we have a post hoc assessment system, and gender is included in that, and with a separate report then to UN Women on the UN-SWAP indicator. So it's a good practice because now we don't have two parallel assessments, one dealing with the whole evaluation report and another one with only UN-SWAP report. So that is in terms of good practice. In terms of the criteria 4, we in 2013 commissioned independent evaluation of the corporate WFP gender policy, which informed the current new WFP gender policy, which runs from 2020. And now we are planning next year to begin the evaluation of the current gender policy. Therefore, we have an example in this case of fulfilling, the new criteria of UN-SWAP 2, criteria 4. Although it's not detailed what it will involve, we think that the example we have, if other entities plan to commission, can be kind of a reference as to what involves a corporate gender policy. So it has to have, of course, full-fledged terms of reference with budget. It has to have gender balance evaluation team. It has to have inception report, and then, of course, the evaluation report itself with any technical paper in it as an annex. So I have shared the link to the evaluation, the whole documentation of the previous evaluation report. And as we will be planning early next year for the new corporate gender policy evaluation, we will be willing to share our experiences in terms of selecting evaluation teams, preparing POR, and planning for the entire evaluation as well. So I will stop here, and if you have any questions, I will be willing to answer under the Q&A session. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, David. So we can open a turn of Q&A. If you have any question, please just ask it now. For some reason, I think we have lost Mesai. I see his camera on, but he's not there.
Oh.
Anyway, do you have any question?
Hello? Priya, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So sorry for that. So the first question that we had was whether UN Women will provide technical assistance for this new reporting cycle. And then we also had another question. If an entity decides to assess a sample of evaluations, is there any criteria for the size of the sample?
So probably I can take on, the second one. The technical note is really clear in terms of, the sampling and some of the consideration that should be taken, whether entities are aiming to include the universe of evaluation report completed in a given year, or do some sampling. So some of the criteria that we have tried to set out in the technical note is for those entities with a quality assurance and decentralized evaluation function, we would advise and encourage the entities to include the total universe of evaluations. If that's not the case, they have also the option of selecting a sample of evaluation. Area would be
those evaluation commissioned by the central evaluation offices and that of the decentralized evaluation, balance in terms of midterm and final evaluation, a mix of evaluation types, program, project, normative, and all sort of other type of evaluation. The other one is the geographic spread. If the evaluation offices are commissioning this evaluation across different geographic areas, that consideration has also to be taken into account. And the other one is, of course, we do have also, this question coming very often about, those agencies, specialist agencies, technical entities. Sometimes, their intervention is focusing only on the normative or, the humanitarian and the development. So we try just to include and entertain, this diversity while we're revising the technical notes. So as much as we could, while we defined, the guiding question as well as the rubrics in the scorecard, we tried our level based in terms of, lending, the strict criteria to respond to, the different mandates and focus areas of the different entities. Probably the first question, Priya can also respond to that, but from the Human Rights and Gender Equality Working Group, we always provide, this help desk and technical support to the different entities as part of their reporting. And every year, once the reports have been submitted into the online application, we also review and provide comments in terms of, especially, as David and everyone mentioned, in terms of harmonizing and making, our reporting across entities, so consistent so that I think comparability would be at least permitted. So Priya, over to you about the technical assistance from coordination.
Well, from the coordination division, we always provide technical support, particularly at reporting times. And this year, because of the change into the updated framework, the UN-SWAP 2.0, we expect that there will be many questions, particularly for those indicators that are new or for those that have changes. However, I think the UN-SWAP spirit is very decentralized and with a broad ownership, and it has been based always in what we call the business owners, as it is the case of UNEC, the Task Force for Gender Equality and Human Rights based evaluation, and so we try to work in tandem with these business owners who actually know much more than anybody in the UN-SWAP team about the particular indicator, and we trust also that your feedback is important for refining the technical notes, that they are always a work in progress, and we are very appreciative of the work you have done during this year, to refine and upgrade and recalibrate the performance indicator for evaluation. So in that regard, of course, we remain available for everything that is needed, but we expect that perhaps on the more technical knowledge and technicalities on how to score the indicator, performance indicator 4, as you have explained today, you will be able to guide your peers into producing a rating within their reporting entity, particular reporting coming from their entity on this specific indicator.
Thank you, Priya. And if you can also see on your WebEx, we also had another question from Katrina Perch. So we did an evaluation, this report of gender equality and women's empowerment, a review of results and practices, which focused on operational experience of IFAD's work in 2017. Would that count as an evaluation of corporate performance? So I think this question is about the criterion number 4. So Masai or Priya?
Yeah. Especially for the fourth criteria, we had a very extensive consultation, which almost took us, 1 year to agree on, to agree and define, the criteria. probably I think one of the challenges, especially for smaller entities, to exceed, the requirement, because sometimes, just to commission or conduct this corporate level gender mainstreaming or evaluation gender policy or strategy of the entity is one, it's expensive, and then the other one is, time taking. But that's the reason why we try just to expand and give, a more expanded time frame. For instance, agencies or entities are not expected to to commission or conduct this corporate gender mainstreaming evaluation every year, but the time frame is at least within a period of 5 to 8 years. So that gives, the smaller entities more time to fulfill, the exceeding requirement. Probably, I think the point that is being raised by Katrina is so much relevant. I know IFAD has a very strong mechanism as well as performance on this particular area. But in the technical note, we define that, we only consider evaluations because, meta-analysis or synthesis, they are evaluative activity, but they don't really fulfill, the full-fledged definition of the unique definition of evaluation. Probably, I think that's one of the limitations that I see. But I think sometimes we wanted, just to make, the technical note as flexible as possible. And if entities really feel that, it's addressing comprehensively, for instance, most of the UN-SWAP performance indicator, both from the aspect of the institutional gender mainstreaming, as well as, as part of the UN-SWAP 2, the gender-related results. I think there is that possibility. Probably, I think we can discuss it bilaterally, but as a guidance, and if we strictly look at, the provision that is being encapsulated in this technical note, we only wanted, evaluation to be considered for our reporting against the evaluation performance indicator, not the meta-analysis. So this is my take, especially aligned with the technical note.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sai. So if there are any further questions, we could also include that. For now, we would like to proceed with the reporting cycle. I'm just going to switch the presentation to that. And then we'll allow Priya to discuss. Oh.
Just talking about the timeline for reporting on UN-SWAP 2.0 in general, we have this year in particular, 2019, reporting on results from 2018, some additional constraints. One is that the Secretary General Executive Office is now reviewing all the Secretary General reports to different bodies, and that means that we have to deliver our report to the ECOSOC for their review and comments, like I think a week or 2 weeks in advance of the usual timeline. Already the submissions to ECOSOC have very strong deadlines, and it takes quite a while for us to clear everything and to produce the report and to submit it properly to ECOSOC. So we are in a way extremely busy during the first 2 months of the year producing the global aggregate UN-SWAP report. And this year, because of the new indicators and particularly because of the focus on results, we expect that it's going to be quite challenging. So just the next slide, please, Gillian. Just to give you an idea of the dimension, the reporting entities are coming to almost 100% of the UN system. Last year, we had 66 reporting entities. I think there
Priya?
are a few ones missing.
Priya, I think you're on mute now. Hello?
You can hear me?
Yes.
What is the last thing you heard?
We heard the 66 entities.
Okay, so I wanted to say that because it's quite a lot of work to go through 66 reports. And as I said before, this year we expect the usual work of going through, let's say, the usual indicators plus additional work on the results indicators that are pretty new, and as well as leadership. So next slide again. Next, please. This is just a collection of all indicators. It refers to what I was saying before, that last year the indicator for evaluation was particularly successful, and we expect that this year you do also well. But of course, we understand that having a stronger indicator with stronger requirements and more demanding requirements make it more difficult. So understanding that it is a transition year, this is just an idea of giving you the bulk of work, which is going through all these 66 plus entities and going through all indicators. So having said that, next, Gillian, we expect that you are able to provide your reports, your entity reports, not only the evaluation report, for 25th January 2019. So that we have the month of February to clear all the reports and to produce our own aggregate report on results of the whole UN system for the ECOSOC and for the Secretary General Executive Office to review it.
Thank you very much, Priya, for that. And with that, I would also want to read another question that we received a few minutes ago about the UN-SWAP. And if any questions come up with a timeline, let us know as well. So we had a question. Two questions, actually, from Taipei Delamini. Hello, thank you for this presentation. I have two questions. The question number one is regarding the second criterion. You mentioned 3 dimensions in the criterion: methodology, sampling, and ethical standards. What is meant by ethical standards, and how could that be measured? And the second question is about the fourth criterion. Does the 8-year period include any evaluations made since 2018, or is it since the new cycle began in 2017? From Ms. Priya, I would
or Felix, I think you can chip in, otherwise I would respond.
Yes, I can respond regarding, it was criterion 2. Basically, the ethical standards are normally standards that are always being used in evaluations, but it's important in the evaluation reports that they are highlighted in it, or sometimes they appear the annexes, or even in the terms of reference. So basically, the ethical standards are standards that are also endorsed by UNEC in different documents that say that all the information that is being provided will remain in confidentiality, and that they will also respect the dignity and integrity of all the stakeholders that participate in the interviewees in the evaluation. And this refers especially to the most vulnerable, saying that if you have an evaluation that includes the most vulnerable people in special needs or in a very difficult situation, that the evaluation should really take this into account, and by taking information from these informants, really try to protect them and to really make sure that their vulnerable situation is really not being made worse, and on the contrary, to really try through the evaluation to give them more meaning as in the difficulties that they're facing. So basically, if you're looking in an evaluation report for the ethical standards, you might find them either in the annexes or in the text itself. It depends really on the evaluation reports itself. Sometimes you can even find them in the terms of reference, which are normally also an annex of the final evaluation report. But I think it's a very important aspect that these ethical standards are integrated in the report itself, because it's a key element also for protecting the most vulnerable and also in some cases women, because basically we're talking here UN-SWAP indicator, and we have gender equality on one side, but as you might see, the criteria 1 to 3, we also have sometimes human rights. So basically, we're reporting here on gender equality, but human rights implication would even further give positive points or positive reflections when you're like scoring the individual criteria as to that you're really integrating gender more strongly. You're even going further than just gender equality, but just even really taking account of human rights considerations. Thank you.
Yeah, just to take on the last question about the exceeding criteria, we have tried even to give example in the technical note. So the expectation is that any corporate gender mainstreaming or gender strategy, or it could be policy or an equivalent evaluation to be conducted within 8 years preceding the period being reported. That means, for instance, I think we already reflected one example. For instance, UNDP Evaluation Office, they conducted, the corporate evaluation on the contribution to gender equality and women empowerment in 2015. So that means UNDP will keep the additional 3 points for 8 consecutive years until 2022 annual reporting. So, for instance, if they had conducted, this evaluation in 2010, this is not going to be applicable for their reporting in 2018. And another typical or classic example was the one provided by David from WFP. For instance, they had commissioned, this gender policy evaluation in 2013. So, for this year reporting, they can get, the additional 3 points for the exceeding criteria, even if, they went ahead in terms of doing another set of corporate evaluation to see their current progress. So yeah, because it's extremely difficult to require agencies to conduct such kind of evaluation within 5 years. That's the reason why we expanded the time frame. So the reporting year really determines whether the entity will get the additional point that we put for this performance indicator as part of UN-SWAP 2.
Okay, thank you very much, Felix and Mesai. So it looks like there's no other question left on our chat box. Just a reminder that the deadline for the submission of your entity reports is on the 25th. And should there be any questions with respect to this presentation and anything related to the UN-SWAP 2, we have the following focal points. So Mesai and Sabas Monroy from OHCHR. And you can also refer to the following references when you begin scoring your evaluation reports. Again, we'd like to express our thank yous to Mesai, Felix, David, and Priya for lending their time to share their experiences and explain UN-SWAP 2.0, as well as to everybody who made time to attend and ask questions. Thank you very much, everybody, and let us know if you have any further questions. Ciao.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. We'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.